My name is Rebecca Collins, 32 years old, and I never thought my own father would turn me away from his 60th birthday party for looking too poor. I stood there in my favorite dress, the one I'd carefully chosen, while my stepmother Diane smirked behind him. "We have important people here," Dad whispered harshly. Little did they know that 6 months later, they'd be begging for my help when I became their boss at the very company they were trying to impress that night. I still remember the sting of that rejection, how it burned through me like acid eating away at what little confidence I had left in our relationship. If you've ever felt that family betrayal that cuts deeper than any knife could, I know you understand. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever experienced family putting appearances over love. If my story resonates with you, consider subscribing to hear more stories about family karma and how sometimes the tables turn when you least expect it. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up, it was just my dad and me after Mom died from breast cancer when I was 8. Harold Collins was my hero then, a strong, hard-working man who somehow managed to work 60 hours a week at his small but growing manufacturing company while still making it to my soccer games. We had a special bond, the kind that forms when it's just two people against the world. Every night, he'd sit on the edge of my bed and tell me stories about my mother, keeping her memory alive. "You have her eyes," he'd say, "and her stubborn determination." I cherish those moments. Everything changed when I turned 14. Dad met Diane at a business networking event. She was glamorous, polished, and worked in public relations. Everything my practical, down-to-earth mother hadn't been. At first, I was happy for him. 6 years of loneliness had taken their toll, and seeing him smile again felt like watching flowers bloom after a long winter. But Diane came with baggage, her 2 children, Tyler and Heather, who were 12 and 16 at the time. From the beginning, it was clear that Diane had specific plans for her new family's social standing. Our modest 4-bedroom house in a respectable neighborhood suddenly wasn't good enough. Within 6 months of their marriage, we moved to a sprawling home in the most expensive part of town, and Dad started working even longer hours to maintain the lifestyle Diane insisted was necessary. "We need to present the right image for your business, Harold," she'd say. "People do business with successful people." Dad, who had built his company from nothing based on quality and integrity, began to shift his priorities. Appearances became everything. It started with small things. Diane would accidentally forget to tell me about family photos, then express exaggerated disappointment when I showed up in jeans instead of the coordinating outfits she'd selected for her biological children. My straight-A report cards would receive a perfunctory good job, while Tyler's C+ in gym class was celebration-worthy because he'd really applied himself. "Rebecca, why can't you be more like Heather?" became a common refrain. Heather with her perfect hair, designer clothes, and mediocre grades that Diane somehow spun into evidence of her daughter's well-rounded personality. "Not everyone needs to be a bookworm," she'd say when I'd lock myself in my room to study. "Some people have social intelligence." By the time I was 17, Dad had stopped attending my academic competitions, even when I made it to the state finals in debate. "Your father is exhausted from providing for this family," Diane would explain, though he somehow found energy to attend all of Tyler's lacrosse games. I learned to stop asking, to stop expecting. Each disappointment hardened something inside me. College applications came, and I set my sights on prestigious business schools. I wanted to follow in Dad's footsteps, maybe even help run his company someday. "Business is really more suited for men," Dad said awkwardly at dinner when I shared my plans. "Have you considered teaching? It's a wonderful career for a woman. Good hours, summers off when you have children." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my father's face. "But I want to build something like you did." "Rebecca always wants to compete with the men," Diane interjected with a laugh that felt like sandpaper against my skin. "So independent." The only person who still believed in me was Grandpa Collins, Dad's father. A retired factory foreman, he'd built his life on hard work and had little patience for Diane's social climbing. During my senior year, he would pick me up every Sunday for lunch, just the two of us. "Your grandmother and I are setting aside money for your education," he told me one afternoon. Don't tell your father. His pride would be hurt knowing we don't think he's providing properly for you. Dad's changed, I said, the words tasting bitter. People who build their lives around impressing others often lose sight of what truly matters, Grandpa replied. Your father will remember eventually. Until then, you focus on building your own path. With Grandpa's secret financial support and scholarships, I attended a well-respected state university instead of the community college Diane had subtly pushed for. I majored in business administration with a minor in finance, graduating summa cum laude. Dad and Diane attended my graduation, but left immediately after the ceremony, missing the honors reception where I received additional recognition. Heather has a dance recital, Dad explained apologetically. Heather was 22 then, taking a gap year before figuring out what she wanted to do with her life. A gap year that had somehow stretched to 3. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at Pinnacle Industries, one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates in the region. What I never told my family was that Pinnacle was where Grandpa Collins had worked for 40 years before retirement. His reputation still carried weight there, though I never used his name to gain advantage. I wanted to succeed on my own merits. And succeed I did. Within 3 years, I moved from administrative assistant to junior analyst to project manager. By my 5th year, I was a junior executive with my own small team. Through it all, I kept my professional success quiet from my family. The few times I visited for obligatory holiday dinners, I described my job in vague terms. Dad never asked for details, and Diane was too busy boasting about Tyler finally graduating college or Heather's new job at a fashion boutique. Tyler's been approached by several investment firms. Diane announced at Thanksgiving the year I turned 30. This was news to me, considering Tyler's business degree had been achieved with a solid C average. That's wonderful, I replied, not mentioning my recent promotion or the substantial raise that came with it. And Heather's friend is getting her into modeling. She has the perfect look. Diane beamed at her daughter, who was texting under the table. Dad smiled proudly at his stepchildren while I silently cut my turkey into precise pieces. I'd long ago accepted that in this family, I was an afterthought, the awkward reminder of Dad's previous life, the one Diane was determined to erase and rebuild according to her vision. What I didn't know was that things were about to change dramatically for all of us. The invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing, almost too elegant to be for a family event. You are cordially invited to celebrate Harold Collins' 60th birthday, it read, listing the venue as Oakmont Country Club, the most exclusive in the city. I ran my fingers over the raised lettering, surprised to be included at all. Dad and I had barely spoken in months, our relationship reduced to occasional text messages and those stilted family holidays. Perhaps this milestone birthday was an opportunity for reconnection. 60 was significant. A time when people often reflect on their lives and legacies. Maybe Dad was finally seeing what he'd lost in his pursuit of Diane's version of success. I called immediately to our SVP. Oh, Rebecca, you're coming? Diane answered, her surprise evident. Wonderful. The party starts at 7. Do try to be on time. I wouldn't miss Dad's birthday, I said, ignoring her tone. Is there a gift registry or something he'd particularly like? Harold doesn't need anything, dear. Your presence will be sufficient. The pause before sufficient spoke volumes. Oh, and Rebecca? It's black tie. I'm sure you can find something appropriate. After hanging up, I stared at my closet. My wardrobe consisted mainly of professional attire, well-made but not extravagant. I had one formal dress from a work gala last year, a simple navy blue sheath that complemented my figure without being flashy. It wasn't designer, but it was elegant and timeless. A week before the party, my office was buzzing with news of a major acquisition Pinnacle Industries was considering. The target company wasn't named, but rumors suggested it was a mid-sized manufacturer in our region. As a junior executive, I wasn't privy to the details, but the excitement was palpable. That same day, I received a strange text from Dad, looking forward to introducing you to some colleagues at the party. Important connections. It was the most enthusiasm he'd shown about my presence in years. Maybe he was finally seeing me as an adult with my own career path. The thought warmed me, and I allowed myself a small spark of hope. The next day, I overheard my direct supervisor mentioning that the CEO would be attending a social event that weekend to meet with the owner of the acquisition target. A coincidence, surely. There were dozens of social events in the city every weekend. 2 days before the party, Diane called again. "Rebecca, I just wanted to check what you're planning to wear," she said without preamble. "I have a navy dress Navy? For an evening event." She clicked her tongue. "I was thinking you might want to shop for something new. Heather's wearing Versace, and Tyler will be in a custom tuxedo." "My dress is perfectly appropriate for a black tie event," I said firmly. "Well, it's just that there will be some very important people there. Harold's business associates." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Including some executives from Pinnacle Industries. Harold's hoping to impress them." My heart skipped a beat. Pinnacle? My company? The acquisition rumors suddenly took on new significance. "Which executives?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh, I don't remember names. Men in suits, you know how they all look alike," she laughed. "Anyway, I just thought you might want to make a better impression than you usually do." The insult stung, but I was too distracted by the implications of what she'd said. If Dad was meeting with Pinnacle executives at his birthday party, and Pinnacle was looking to acquire a local manufacturer. "Thanks for the suggestion," I said neutrally. "I'll see you Saturday." After hanging up, I called my grandfather. "Pinnacle executives are coming to Dad's party," I said after our usual greetings. "Do you know anything about this?" There was a pause. "Your father's been having financial difficulties," Grandpa finally said. "The company isn't doing as well as he pretends. Diane's spending habits haven't helped." "Is he selling the business?" The thought made my stomach clench. That company had been Dad's life's work, started in our garage when I was a toddler. "He's exploring options," Grandpa said carefully. "I believe Pinnacle is one potential buyer." "Why wouldn't he tell me this?" "Pride, Rebecca. And perhaps he doesn't see you as part of that world." Grandpa's voice was gentle but honest. "Diane has convinced him that appearances are everything. He's terrified of looking like a failure. So this party is basically a business meeting disguised as a birthday celebration?" "Essentially. Diane has invited everyone she thinks might matter. Old money, new money, potential investors, potential buyers. And me? Why invite the daughter he barely acknowledges?" Another pause. "Family completeness. It looks better to have his actual daughter there. But, Rebecca." "Yes? Diane doesn't want you to outshine her or her children. Be prepared for that." After we hung up, I sat on my bed, turning the situation over in my mind. If Pinnacle was considering buying Dad's company, my presence complicated things. Should I reveal that I worked there? Would it help or hurt Dad's position? The night before the party, I carefully pressed my navy dress and polished my modest pearl necklace, Mom's, the only piece of jewelry I had from her. I wrapped Dad's gift, a vintage fountain pen I'd found at an antique store, similar to one he'd had when I was a child. Despite everything, I wanted this to be a genuine celebration of his life. As I was setting out my accessories, my phone pinged with an Instagram notification. Heather had posted a photo of herself in a glittering gold dress with a caption, "Ready to help Daddy celebrate with some very important guests tomorrow. #VIP status #Versace." In the background of the photo, I could see a stack of gift boxes with designer labels. The display of wealth was ostentatious, especially knowing what Grandpa had told me about the company's financial situation. I went to sleep that night feeling a mix of emotions. Hope for reconciliation with Dad, anxiety about the Pinnacle connection, and an unshakable sense that tomorrow would somehow change everything. Saturday evening arrived with perfect early autumn weather, crisp and clear with a sunset that painted the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks. I spent extra time on my appearance, styling my hair in an elegant updo and applying makeup that enhanced my features without being overdone. Looking in the mirror, I saw my mother's eyes staring back at me, and I touched the pearl necklace at my throat. "Wish me luck, Mom," I whispered. I arrived at Oakmont Country Club 30 minutes early, wanting time to compose myself before facing the crowd. The venue was impressive, a historic stone building surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens and a championship golf course. Valets in crisp uniforms stood ready to park arriving vehicles. After surrendering my modest sedan to a valet, I smoothed my navy dress and walked toward the entrance, Dad's gift tucked under my arm. A few early guests milled about in the foyer, cocktails already in hand. I recognized some of Dad's longtime business associates, who nodded politely but didn't approach. Then I saw him, Dad, looking distinguished in a tuxedo, his hair more silver than I remembered. For a moment, seeing him standing alone by a large arrangement of flowers, he looked like the father I remembered from childhood. My heart lifted. "Dad," I called, walking toward him with a genuine smile. He turned, and for a brief moment, his face lit up. "Rebecca, you made it." We embraced awkwardly, the gift box creating distance between us. "Happy birthday," I said, offering him the carefully wrapped package. "Thank you, sweetheart." "You didn't have to, Harold." Diane's voice cut through our reunion like a knife. She appeared at his side in a skin-tight red gown that must have cost more than my monthly salary. Her eyes swept over me from head to toe, her smile tightening. "Rebecca, you're early." "I wanted to help if needed," I offered. "Everything's handled by professionals," she said dismissively, then leaned close to Dad's ear, whispering something that made his expression change. He looked at me again, but the warmth had vanished from his eyes, replaced by something that looked unsettlingly like embarrassment. "Rebecca, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" My stomach tightened as he guided me to a quiet corner of the foyer, away from the arriving guests. Diane remained a few feet away, watching with that same tight smile. "Is everything okay?" I asked. Dad cleared his throat, not quite meeting my eyes. "Rebecca, I'm not sure how to say this, but there's been a change in plans." "What do you mean?" "The guest list had to be trimmed at the last minute. Fire codes and all that." He glanced back at Diane, who gave him an encouraging nod. "And well, tonight is very important for the business. We have some high-profile guests coming." I stared at him, not comprehending. "Are you asking me to leave?" He lowered his voice. "Your dress, it's not quite up to the standard of the event. Diane we thought it might be better if you came to a family-only dinner next week instead." The blood drained from my face. "You're turning me away because of my dress?" "It's not just the dress," he muttered, still not meeting my eyes. You look a bit too poor for this gathering. These people, they judge everything on appearances." Each word hit like a physical blow. "Too poor," I repeated, my voice barely audible. "Dad, this is a perfectly appropriate dress." "It's off the rack," Diane interjected, stepping closer. "Everyone will know at a glance. We can't have Harold's daughter looking like she shops at department stores when we're trying to impress the pinnacle executives. What would they think about the Collins family?" "They might think we value substance over showing off," I replied, finding my voice. "Dad, this is ridiculous. I'm your daughter. And as my daughter, you should understand how important tonight is." His voice hardened. "This isn't about you, Rebecca. It's about the future of the company." "The company I was never good enough to be part of, you mean?" The hurt was morphing into anger. "The one you never thought a woman could run?" "This isn't the time or place," he hissed, glancing nervously at the growing crowd of arriving guests. "Please don't make a scene." Over his shoulder, I spotted Tyler and Heather entering with a group of friends. Heather's gold dress sparkled ostentatiously under the chandeliers, while Tyler's custom tuxedo was accessorized with what appeared to be a Rolex. They saw me, and Heather whispered something to Tyler that made him smirk. "I can't believe this is happening," I said, my voice shaking. "You're actually throwing me out of your birthday party because I don't look expensive enough? Rebecca, please understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. I understand that your wife and her children have completely replaced your actual family. I understand that appearances matter more to you than I ever will. That's not fair, he protested weakly. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my life, Dad? My career? My achievements? You don't even know what I do for a living anymore. Dad looked genuinely confused. You work in some office, don't you? The vagueness of his understanding of my life was the final straw. Yes, Dad. Some office. You know what? Enjoy your party with your important people. I won't embarrass you with my presence. I turned to leave, but Diane's voice stopped me. Harold, she's making a scene. People are watching. I looked around and realized she was right. Several guests had paused their conversations, observing our confrontation with poorly disguised interest. Dad's face flushed with humiliation, not at his behavior, but at the attention it was drawing. Rebecca, please just go quietly. We'll talk tomorrow. There's nothing left to talk about, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. As I turned again to leave, a security guard approached, summoned by Diane's discreet gesture. Is there a problem here? He asked, looking between us. No problem, Dad said quickly. My daughter was just leaving. I'll escort her out, the guard offered, as if I were some troublemaker rather than an invited guest. The ultimate indignity. That won't be necessary, I said with all the dignity I could muster. I know my way out. I handed Dad's gift to the guard. For my father. Though I doubt there's anything in that box as valuable as what he's throwing away right now. As I walked toward the door, I heard Heather's distinct laugh behind me. Through the glass doors, I could see a black luxury sedan pulling up and a distinguished older man emerging. Walter Reed, the CEO of Pinnacle Industries. My boss's boss's boss. The irony was almost too much to bear. I slipped past him before he could see my face, hurrying to the valet stand for my car. The drive home was a blur through tears I finally allowed to fall. The gift I'd so carefully chosen sat unwrapped in the party I'd been deemed too shabby to attend. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The last fragile hope I'd held for reconciliation with my father crumbled to dust. I was done trying to earn the love and respect that should have been mine by birthright. Sunday morning dawned gray and rainy, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, replaying the humiliation of the previous evening over and over in my mind. My phone remained silent, no call from Dad, no apology, not even a text. The silence spoke volumes about where I ranked in his priorities. Around noon, my phone finally rang. Grandpa Collins. I heard what happened, he said without preamble. Your father should be ashamed of himself. You were there? I hadn't seen him in the brief time I'd been at the venue. In the background. I watched the whole thing but couldn't get to you before you left. His voice was tight with anger. I gave Harold a piece of my mind afterward. I'm sure that went over well with Diane, I said bitterly. I don't give a damn what that woman thinks. Never have. He sighed heavily. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. After you left, I spoke with Walter Reed. My breath caught. The CEO of Pinnacle? We go way back. I mentioned you work there. Grandpa, you didn't, I did. And I'm not sorry. Walter had no idea Harold's daughter was one of his rising stars. He was quite impressed when I told him about your career trajectory. I groaned. This is going to be so awkward at work tomorrow. Perhaps. But sometimes discomfort precedes opportunity. Grandpa's voice took on a mysterious tone. Don't be surprised if you receive an interesting email soon. As if on cue, my work phone chimed with an incoming message. Hold on, Grandpa. I checked the notification. It's from Walter Reed's executive assistant. He wants to meet with me tomorrow morning. I thought he might. Grandpa sounded satisfied. Rebecca, your father made a terrible mistake last night. Not just morally, but strategically. He has no idea who you've become. After hanging up with Grandpa, I stared at the email, trying to process what was happening. Why would the CEO want to meet with me? Had Grandpa said something that put my job at risk? Or was this somehow related to Dad's company? I spent the rest of Sunday preparing for the meeting, researching recent Pinnacle acquisitions, and refreshing my knowledge of the company's strategic plan. If this was related to Dad's business, I needed to be ready. Monday morning, I arrived at work an hour early, dressed in my sharpest suit. At precisely 9 o'clock, I was escorted to the executive floor, an area I'd visited only twice before, and never to meet with anyone as senior as Walter Reed. His corner office offered a panoramic view of the city. Walter himself stood to greet me, extending his hand with a warm smile that contrasted with his reputation as a ruthless businessman. Rebecca Collins. Finally, we meet properly. Please sit down. I took the offered chair, noting that we weren't alone. 3 other executives sat around the conference table in the corner of his office, including my department director and the head of acquisitions. I'll get straight to the point, Walter said, returning to his seat. Your grandfather speaks very highly of you. He's biased, I said with a small smile. But I appreciate his support, perhaps. But your performance reviews and project outcomes speak for themselves. He slid a folder across the desk. You've been with us 5 years and have consistently exceeded expectations. Yet you've never leveraged your family connection to Pinnacle. I wanted to succeed on my own merits, sir. He nodded approvingly. Admirable. And you have succeeded. Which brings me to why you're here. He gestured to the acquisition director. Mark, please explain Project Phoenix. Mark leaned forward. Ms. Collins, Pinnacle has been looking to expand our custom manufacturing division. We've identified a prime acquisition target, a mid-sized company with good fundamentals, but cash flow problems and organizational inefficiencies. My heart raced. Collins Manufacturing, I said quietly. Walter nodded. Your father's company. We've been in discussions for several months. What he doesn't know is that we've completed our due diligence, and we're ready to move forward with the acquisition. I struggled to keep my expression neutral. I see. And you're telling me this because? Because we need someone to oversee the transition and subsequent restructuring, Walter said. Someone who understands both Pinnacle's culture and the target company's operations. Someone with both business acumen and personal insight. You want me to manage the acquisition of my father's company. The irony was staggering. Precisely. It's an unusual situation, I grant you, but potentially advantageous for all parties. I sat back, mind racing. Mr. Reed, I should disclose that my relationship with my father is complicated, especially after Saturday night. Yes, your grandfather mentioned the unfortunate incident. Walter's expression hardened. Frankly, it reinforced my belief that Collins Manufacturing needs new leadership. Harold has allowed personal relationships to cloud his business judgment. The company's financials reflect that poor decision-making. My department director spoke up. Rebecca, we've reviewed the books. Your father's company has been mismanaged for years. Nepotism, inflated salaries for underqualified executives, questionable expense accounts. The business itself is sound, but the management is not. Let me guess, I said, a sinking feeling in my stomach. His wife and stepchildren are on the payroll? Executive Vice President of Public Relations, Mark confirmed, despite no PR experience or degree. And the stepson as investment strategist, with a salary 3 times industry standard for his qualifications. The pieces fell into place. Dad's company was struggling because of Diane's extravagance and the positions he'd created for her children. The fancy clothes, the country club membership, the designer labels, all funded by the company he'd built from nothing, the company he'd never thought his daughter capable of helping run. This presents an ethical dilemma for me, I said carefully. I want to be clear that if I accept this position, my decisions would be based solely on business considerations, not personal history. Walter smiled. That's exactly why you're the right person for the job. You understand the human element, but you've demonstrated the ability to remain objective under pressure. I took a deep breath. When would this start? Immediately. The acquisition will be announced next Monday. We'd want you to be present for that announcement and to begin the transition assessment right away. 1 week. In 1 week, I would become, effectively, my father's boss. The thought was both terrifying and strangely satisfying. Before I agree, I need to know something, I said. What are your plans for the current executives? Walter exchanged glances with the others. Standard procedure is a 90-day evaluation period. Those who add value stay. Those who don't. He shrugged eloquently. Including my father? Harold would remain as a figurehead during the transition, with the opportunity to earn a continuing role if he demonstrates value. Walter leaned forward. Rebecca, I understand this is personal for you, but I need to know if you can separate family feelings from business necessities. Could I? The memory of standing outside the party, rejected and humiliated, was still raw. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about saving a company that employed hundreds of people, a company that had been my father's legacy before Diane's influence. I can separate them, I said firmly, and I accept the position. Walter smiled and stood to shake my hand again. Excellent. Your new title is Transition Director with a VP-level compensation package. HR will have the paperwork to you by noon. As the meeting concluded and I prepared to leave, Walter added, Oh, and Rebecca? One more thing. Yes, sir? Your grandfather mentioned you have a navy dress you're particularly fond of. Wear it to the announcement on Monday. I think it would be appropriate. The small smile on his face told me he knew exactly what he was suggesting. Perhaps Grandpa had told him more about Saturday night than I realized. I felt a smile tugging at my own lips. I think that can be arranged. Walking back to my office, soon to be my former office as I moved to the executive floor, I realized how dramatically my life had just changed. A week ago, I was a junior executive quietly building my career. Now I was about to become the person in charge of restructuring my father's company. If this were about revenge, I'd be jubilant. But the truth was more complicated. This was about business, about correcting years of mismanagement. If that meant Diane and her children would face professional consequences, so be it. They'd earned that through their own actions, not because of my personal feelings. I sat at my desk, staring at the family photo I kept hidden in my drawer, Dad and me at my high school graduation, before Diane had fully separated us. We were both smiling, his arm around my shoulders, proud and connected. What happened to us, Dad? I whispered to the photo. My phone buzzed with a text from Grandpa. Did you meet with Walter? Yes, I typed back. I took the job. 3 disappeared then. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become. Your father will be too, once he remembers who he really is. I hoped Grandpa was right. But either way, I had a job to do, one I was uniquely qualified for. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose that went beyond proving myself to a father who had forgotten how to see me. If you've ever had to make a tough choice between family loyalty and doing what's right, you know the weight of that decision. Sometimes the hardest part of family drama is recognizing when to stand your ground, even when it means confronting the people who should have been your biggest supporters. If this story is resonating with you so far, take a second to hit that like button, and let's continue with what happened next when worlds collided. The week between accepting the position and the acquisition announcement was the most intense of my professional life. I was pulled into countless meetings with the executive team, poring over financials, organizational charts, and integration plans. Each document revealed more about the true state of my father's company, and the picture wasn't pretty. Collins Manufacturing had been profitable for decades, building a reputation for quality custom metal fabrication. But in the last 7 years, coinciding exactly with Dad's marriage to Diane, the company had begun a slow decline. Expenses had skyrocketed while revenue remained flat. The pattern was obvious to anyone with basic business acumen. These executive compensation packages are way above industry standard, I noted during a meeting with the financial team. Especially for a company this size. The CFO nodded grimly. Particularly troubling is the expansion of the executive team from 3 to 7 people in the last 5 years, with minimal corresponding growth. I didn't need to see the names to know who those new executives were. Diane, Tyler, Heather, and probably some of Diane's friends, all drawing substantial salaries for nebulous roles. And the expense accounts, I continued, flipping through the reports. monthly clothing allowances, 3 company cars for a single executive, memberships to Oakmont Country Club for the entire executive team. The justification given was client development, the CFO said, making air quotes. But our analysis shows minimal client interaction from most of these executives. By Friday, I had developed a comprehensive evaluation system for all Collins manufacturing employees, from the factory floor to the executive suite. The criteria were straightforward. Job responsibilities, performance metrics, contribution to company goals, and skill sets. Everyone would be assessed by the same standards, regardless of title or family connection. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I hadn't heard from Dad at all since the disastrous party night. Either he was too embarrassed to reach out, or he simply didn't consider the incident important enough to address. Either way, his silence reinforced my determination to approach the acquisition as a strictly professional matter. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. As instructed, I wore my navy dress, the same one I'd been deemed too poor to wear to Dad's party. This time, I paired it with a pearl necklace and a tailored blazer that conveyed authority without ostentation. My hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, my makeup subtle but flawless. Walter Reed met me in the lobby of Collins Manufacturing, along with Mark from Acquisitions and 2 members of Pinnacle's legal team. "Ready for this?" Walter asked quietly. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, squaring my shoulders. The Collins executive team had been summoned to the main conference room without explanation, told only that an important announcement was forthcoming. We entered to find them already seated around the large table. My father at the head, Diane to his right, Tyler and Heather flanking her. The other executives, men who had been with the company since I was a child, filled the remaining seats. Dad's face registered shock when he saw me enter with Walter Reed. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Walter stepped forward. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Walter Reed, CEO of Pinnacle Industries. Thank you for meeting with us today." Dad stood, extending his hand. "Walter, good to see you again. I wasn't expecting—" "Harold, please sit," Walter said, his tone friendly but authoritative. "I have an announcement that affects everyone in this room." The atmosphere shifted instantly, tension crackling like static electricity. Dad slowly sank back into his chair, his eyes darting between Walter and me, confusion evident on his face. "Effective immediately, Pinnacle Industries has acquired Collins Manufacturing," Walter stated. "The paperwork was finalized this morning. Collins will now operate as a wholly owned subsidiary of Pinnacle, with integration to begin today." The room erupted in murmurs. Diane's perfectly made-up face froze in an expression of shock. Tyler and Heather exchanged panicked glances. "This can't be right," Dad finally managed. We were still in preliminary discussions. Nothing was finalized. "Your CFO signed the final agreements last week, Harold," Walter said, nodding toward the ashen-faced man at the far end of the table. "As authorized by your board of directors." "Without consulting me?" Dad's voice rose in indignation. "The board felt it was in the company's best interest, given the financial situation." Walter's tone was matter-of-fact. "Now, allow me to introduce Rebecca Collins, who will be serving as transition director for the acquisition." All eyes turned to me. Dad's face had gone pale, while Diane's had flushed an angry red. I stepped forward, channeling every ounce of professional poise I possessed. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady. "Over the next 90 days, I'll be evaluating all aspects of Collins Manufacturing's operations and personnel to ensure optimal integration with Pinnacle's systems and culture." "This is ridiculous," Diane interrupted, finding her voice. "Harold, you can't allow this." "I'm afraid it's not up to Harold anymore," Walter said smoothly. "The acquisition is complete. Rebecca has full authority to implement the transition plan approved by Pinnacle's board." Dad seemed to finally find his voice. "My daughter? You put my daughter in charge of my company." "Your former company," Walter corrected gently. "And yes, Rebecca has been with Pinnacle for 5 years, rising to junior executive based entirely on her own merits." She's uniquely qualified for this role, having both industry expertise and familiarity with Collins Manufacturing's history. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The daughter who hadn't been good enough to attend her father's birthday party was now effectively his boss. If there are no further questions about the acquisition itself, I said, taking control of the meeting, I'd like to outline the transition process. For the next hour, I detailed the evaluation procedures, timeline, and expectations. Throughout my presentation, I maintained absolute professionalism, addressing everyone with the same respectful tone, including my father and Diane. This wasn't personal, at least not visibly. As the meeting concluded and people began filing out, Diane approached me, her smile tight and artificial. "Rebecca, darling, we should talk privately. Family to family." "I'd be happy to schedule a meeting with you, Mrs. Collins," I replied, deliberately formal. "Please contact my assistant to find a suitable time." Her smile faltered. "Don't be ridiculous. We're family. At work, we're colleagues," I corrected her. "And all colleagues follow the same protocols during this transition." Diane's mask slipped, anger flashing in her eyes. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Using your position at Pinnacle to get revenge for a simple misunderstanding." "This acquisition was in progress long before the incident at Dad's party," I replied calmly. "My role is to ensure a smooth transition based on business metrics, not personal feelings." "Harold won't stand for this," she hissed. "Harold doesn't have a choice," I pointed out. "The board made their decision. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have meetings scheduled with department heads." As Diane stormed off, I noticed Dad standing alone by the window, looking shell-shocked. Part of me wanted to go to him, to explain, to reassure. But the professional boundaries I'd established needed to be maintained. This was day one of a complex process. Personal reconciliations, if they were to happen at all, would have to wait. The following weeks were intense. I established my temporary office in what had been the visitors' conference room, deliberately avoiding taking over any existing executive space. The message was clear. I was here to evaluate, not to conquer. True to form, my step-siblings began their campaign of undermining almost immediately. Tyler started spreading rumors that I was incompetent, riding on my grandfather's coattails at Pinnacle. Heather took a more direct approach, filing a formal complaint alleging that my evaluation criteria were designed specifically to target her position. I addressed both situations with calm professionalism. Tyler's rumors died quickly when staff saw my methodical, fair approach to evaluations. Heather's complaint was reviewed by Pinnacle's HR department and dismissed when they confirmed that the same criteria were being applied to all employees. Dad, meanwhile, retreated into a shell of professional courtesy. In meetings, he was formal and distant. He cooperated with the process but volunteered nothing beyond what was explicitly asked. I could see him watching me, though, observing how I handled challenging situations, how I spoke to the factory workers with the same respect I showed the executives, how I stayed late reviewing personnel files to ensure my assessments were fair. One evening, about 3 weeks into the transition, I was working alone in my temporary office when Dad appeared in the doorway. "You're still here," he said, sounding surprised. I looked up from my laptop. "So are you. I've always stayed late. Even before." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the Pinnacle logo now displayed on the wall. "You know, Rebecca, you're good at this. Better than I expected." The backhanded compliment stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "Thank you." He hesitated, then entered the room, closing the door behind him. "Can we talk?" Not as executive and transition director, as father and daughter. I closed my laptop. "I think that's overdue. Why didn't you tell me you worked at Pinnacle?" He asked, taking a seat across from me. Would it have mattered? I countered. "You never asked about my career. Not once in 5 years." He had the grace to look ashamed. "I should have. I just assumed that I had some insignificant desk job because I'm a woman?" The bitterness I'd tried to suppress crept into my voice. "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "Isn't it? Dad, you discouraged me from pursuing business. You told me it wasn't suitable for women." You never once considered that I might want to be part of Colin's manufacturing. He sighed heavily. I was wrong. Seeing you these past weeks, you have a natural talent for this. Like I did at your age. Like Mom did too. I reminded him. She helped you start this company. You used to tell me that story all the time before. I didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what had changed. Before Diane, he said quietly. Rebecca about the party. I'm sorry. I was wrong to turn you away. So wrong. The apology, while welcome, felt incomplete. It wasn't just the party, Dad. It was years of making me feel less than. Less important than Diane's children. Less capable because I'm a woman. Less worthy of your attention. I got lost, he admitted, looking suddenly older than his 60 years. Somewhere along the way, I started believing that appearances mattered more than substance. That the right connections, the right image would save the company. He shook his head. Instead, I nearly destroyed everything I built. The company was in trouble long before the acquisition, I said gently. The financials make that clear. Diane's lifestyle is expensive, he said. And I couldn't say no. Not to her, not to her children. But you could say no to me. He flinched as if I'd struck him. You were always so strong, so independent, like your mother. I thought you didn't need me. I did need you, Dad. I needed you to be proud of me. To believe in me. I was proud, he insisted. I just didn't know how to show it after your mother died. And then Diane came along, and she was so different from your mother, so confident about how things should be done. The conversation continued late into the evening, years of misunderstandings and hurt feelings gradually coming to light. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Too much had happened for that, but it was a start. For the first time in years, Dad was seeing me clearly, not through Diane's distorting lens. As we prepared to leave, Dad asked the question I'd been expecting. What happens to me in all this? To my position? That depends on the outcome of your evaluation, like everyone else, I said honestly. But Dad, your skills as a manufacturing innovator are still valuable. If you can separate yourself from the financial mismanagement of recent years, there's a place for you here. And Diane? Tyler and Heather. I met his gaze directly. Their evaluations aren't looking good, Dad. The positions they hold don't align with their qualifications, and their contributions don't justify their compensation. He nodded slowly. I created this situation. I'll have to live with the consequences. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. Your mother would be proud of you, Rebecca. I know I am. The words I'd waited so long to hear washed over me like a healing balm. But the harder part was still to come. The family confrontation that would inevitably follow when the evaluations were complete and the restructuring began in earnest. My grandfather called later that night. How's it going, Rebecca? Professionally, right on schedule. Personally, complicated. Family always is, he said wisely. But sometimes a business crisis is what it takes to strip away the pretense and get to the truth. As I hung up, I thought about his words. The truth was emerging, painful though it might be. The question now was whether our family could survive it. 2 months into the transition, the preliminary evaluations were complete. The results confirmed what I'd suspected. While most of Colin's Manufacturing's employees were competent and hardworking, the executive team had serious issues. Specifically, the positions held by Diane, Tyler, and Heather were essentially manufactured roles with inflated salaries and minimal accountability. Dad had begun working closely with Pinnacle's R&D team, focusing on his true strength, product innovation. While gradually accepting that his time as CEO was over, he seemed almost relieved to be freed from the administrative and financial burdens, returning to the creative work he'd always loved. I had just finalized my recommendations for the restructuring when my phone rang. It was Diane. Rebecca, darling, I'm hosting a family dinner tonight. 7 o'clock. Your father insists you join us. The forced cheerfulness in her voice couldn't mask the underlying tension. This wasn't a social invitation, it was a strategic move. May I ask what the occasion is? I kept my tone professional. Does family need an occasion? She trilled. It's been so long since we've all been together properly. Harold misses you. I doubted that was her true motivation, but I was curious to see what she had planned. I'll be there. Wonderful. And Rebecca? This is a family dinner. Leave work at the office, won't you? The implication was clear. She wanted to separate me from my professional authority, to re-establish the old dynamic where I was just Harold's awkward daughter, not the executive determining her fate. I'll see you at 7, I replied noncommittally. That evening, I drove to the house where I'd spent my teenage years, the showplace home Diane had insisted on buying when she married Dad. Despite living there for 6 years, it had never felt like home to me, always more of a stage set for Diane's vision of successful family life. I parked behind Tyler's BMW and sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts. This wouldn't be a pleasant evening, but it was perhaps necessary, a clearing of the air before the professional changes were announced. Diane answered the door herself, dressed in an elegant hostess outfit that probably cost more than most Collins employees made in a week. Rebecca, right on time. The house smelled of expensive candles, and the catered dinner Diane was undoubtedly passing off as her own cooking. Tyler and Heather were already in the living room, cocktails in hand, their expressions a mixture of resentment and forced politeness. The prodigal daughter returns, Tyler said, raising his glass in a mock toast. Good to see you too, Tyler. I replied evenly. Dad emerged from his study, looking uncomfortable but determined. Rebecca. Thank you for coming. He gave me a quick, awkward hug. Can I get you a drink? Just water, thanks. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Diane clapped her hands. Let's move to the dining room, shall we? Dinner is ready. The formal dining room was set with the best china and crystal, fresh flowers arranged in an elaborate centerpiece. Diane had pulled out all the stops, creating the image of a prosperous, harmonious family. The irony wasn't lost on me. As we took our seats, Diane placing me as far from Dad as possible, she launched into hostess mode, serving the catered food with flourishes and unnecessary explanations of each dish. Everyone played along with a charade, making small talk about the weather and local news, carefully avoiding any mention of work or the acquisition. It wasn't until dessert was served that Diane finally revealed her agenda. So, Rebecca, she began, her voice honey-sweet, Harold tells me you've been doing wonderfully with this transition project. It's going well. I agreed neutrally. I'm sure it must be so challenging, having to evaluate your own family members. She sighed dramatically. Such a conflict of interest. I mentioned that to Walter when we had lunch last week. The implied threat was clear. She tried to undermine me with the CEO. Walter and I have discussed the potential for conflict extensively, I replied calmly. All my evaluations are reviewed by an independent committee to ensure fairness. Tyler leaned forward. Come on, Becca. We all know what's happening here. You're using your position to get back at us for years of perceived slights. I'm doing my job, Tyler, just like everyone at Collins is expected to do. Your job, Heather scoffed. Let's be honest. You only got this position because Grandpa Collins pulled strings. Everyone knows it. Dad set down his fork with a clatter. That's enough, Heather. What? It's true, she insisted. Rebecca has been jealous of us for years. Now she has the power to punish us, and she's using it. Is that what you think this is about? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Jealousy. Obviously, Diane interjected. You've always resented me for taking your mother's place, and you've transferred that resentment to my children. It's textbook psychology, dear. The condescension in her tone was the final straw. 5 years of corporate training and controlling my emotions in tense situations served me well as I carefully placed my napkin beside my plate and looked directly at Diane. Let me be perfectly clear, I said quietly. This is not about jealousy or resentment. This is about a company that has been systematically mismanaged to fund your lifestyle and provide cushy, do-nothing jobs for your children. The room went silent. How dare you? Diane finally whispered. The financial records don't lie, Diane. Collins Manufacturing has been bleeding money for years to support executive salaries and perks that far exceed industry standards and the company's revenue capabilities. Rebecca, Dad began, but I held up my hand.
No, Dad. It needs to be said.
For years, I watched as you changed from the father who taught me the value of hard work and integrity into someone who valued appearances over substance, who created non-existent positions for his stepchildren while telling his own daughter that business wasn't suitable for women. Tyler jumped in. My position is legitimate. I've brought in several important clients. Your position costs the company 3 times what the average investment analyst makes, Tyler, while generating less than half the expected returns. That's not my opinion. That's data. Heather's face had flushed an angry red. This is exactly what we mean. You're twisting things to make us look bad because you're jealous that Dad loves us. This isn't about who Dad loves, I replied, my voice softening slightly. It's about a company that employs hundreds of people whose livelihoods have been put at risk by financial mismanagement. Diane's mask of civility finally cracked completely. I have always known you were a problem, she hissed. From the day I met you, with your judgmental eyes just like your mother's. Harold couldn't see it, but I could. You were competition for his attention, a constant reminder of his past. I tried to minimize the damage you could do. The raw honesty of her admission stunned everyone at the table, including Dad. Diane, he said slowly, what are you saying? I'm saying I protected you from her influence, Diane replied, her voice rising. She would have kept you small, Harold. Content with that little garage operation, instead of building something impressive. I pushed you to think bigger, to be more. By spending money we didn't have. Dad's voice had a dangerous edge I hadn't heard in years. By hiring our children into positions they weren't qualified for? I created the life you deserved, Diane insisted. The connections, the country club membership, the right address, those things matter in business. What matters in business is having a product people want and managing your resources wisely, Dad countered. Everything else is just window dressing. I sat in silence, watching as years of illusion crumbled around my father. He was finally seeing what I had observed since I was 14, that Diane had never loved him for himself, but for what she thought she could mold him into. I can't believe you're taking her side, Diane spat, gesturing toward me. After everything I've done for you. After how I've supported your business. Support it. Dad laughed bitterly. Diane, you've nearly bankrupted my company. If Pinnacle hadn't acquired us, we'd be facing insolvency within a year. That's ridiculous. We're fine financially. We're not, Dad said firmly. I've been meeting with the financial team as part of the transition. I've seen the real numbers, not the sanitized versions you insisted our CFO prepare for me. We've been in serious trouble for years. Tyler and Heather exchanged alarmed glances. Dad, what does this mean for us? Tyler asked. For our positions? Before Dad could answer, I spoke up. It means your positions as they currently exist won't continue under the new structure. You're firing us? Heather's voice rose to a shriek.
No.
I'm recommending reassignment to roles that match your actual qualifications and that provide value to the company, I clarified. You'll be offered positions with fair compensation based on industry standards and your skill sets. Whether you accept those positions is up to you. This is your revenge, Diane said, her voice shaking with anger. For the party. For turning you away. This is business, I corrected her. The party was just the culmination of years of being treated as less than in my own family. But my recommendations aren't based on that. They're based on performance metrics, skill assessments, and the company's needs moving forward. Dad stood up abruptly. I think this dinner is over. Harold, Diane protested.
No, Diane.
I've heard enough. He turned to me. Rebecca, thank you for your honesty tonight. I know it wasn't easy. As I rose to leave, Tyler made one last attempt. Dad, you can't let her do this. We're your family. Dad looked at him sadly. Yes, you are. And I failed you by not holding you to higher standards. by letting you believe that titles and salaries you hadn't earned were your due. That stops now. I gathered my purse and jacket, preparing to leave this house of broken illusions. As I reached the door, Dad followed me out to the porch. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "For tonight. For everything. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Dad. Or even to hurt them, though I know it feels that way." "I know." He sighed heavily. "I created this situation by trying to keep everyone happy instead of doing what was right. The company's in trouble because of my choices." "The company can be saved," I assured him. "The core business is still strong. Thanks to you." He hesitated, then asked, "What happens to Diane in all this?" The question I'd been dreading. "Her position as Executive VP of Public Relations will be eliminated. There's no justification for it based on her qualifications or the company's needs." He nodded slowly. "I suspected as much." After a pause, he added, "I don't think our marriage will survive this, Rebecca, once the money and status are gone." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my father hurt. "Don't be. It's time I faced reality in business and in my personal life." He attempted a small smile. "You know, you really are like your mother. She never let me get away with self-deception either." As I drove away from the house, I felt oddly lighter, as if a burden I'd carried for years had been lifted. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, a lancing of a long festering wound. What would grow in its place remained to be seen, but at least the infection of lies and pretense had been cleared away. 6 months after the acquisition announcement, Collins Manufacturing had been successfully integrated into Pinnacle Industries. The transition hadn't been without challenges, but the company was now on solid financial footing for the first time in years. My office on the executive floor of what was now Pinnacle Custom Manufacturing overlooked the production facility, where skilled workers transformed raw metal into precision components. From my window, I could see Dad on the factory floor, working with a team of engineers on a new production method. He looked more energized than I had seen him in years, freed from administrative burdens to focus on innovation, his true passion. The restructuring had been comprehensive, but fair. Every position had been evaluated based on objective criteria, and while some roles had been eliminated, we'd managed to avoid mass layoffs by reassigning personnel to appropriate positions. Tyler had initially rejected his reassignment to junior analyst, storming out dramatically and threatening legal action. 3 weeks later, after discovering that his resume didn't open doors the way he'd expected, he returned, humbled and willing to accept the position. He was now working under a senior analyst who was proving to be a demanding but effective mentor. Heather had taken a different path, quitting immediately rather than accept what she called a demotion. Last I heard, she was working at a high-end boutique, ironically making less than she would have in the reassigned position I'd offered her. Diane had been the most difficult case. After her position was eliminated, she had launched a campaign of misinformation, contacting clients and employees with tales of family betrayal and corporate espionage. The legal team had been forced to send a cease and desist letter, which had finally silenced her public attacks, though I still heard occasional rumors of her disparaging comments at country club events. The most significant change, however, had been in my relationship with Dad. We weren't fully healed. Too many years of distance and hurt couldn't be erased in a few months, but we were rebuilding on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. Our weekly lunch meetings had become a fixture in both our calendars. Today, as we sat in the small cafe near the facility, Dad seemed preoccupied. "Everything okay?" I asked as he absently stirred his coffee. "Diane filed for divorce yesterday," he said quietly. I set down my sandwich.
"I'm sorry, Dad."
"Don't be. It's been over for months, really. Once the company restructuring made it clear she wouldn't maintain the lifestyle she wanted." He shrugged. "Let's just say I finally saw clearly what had been in front of me for years. Still, it can't be easy." "It's not," he admitted. "Failure never is. But you know what? I'm more disappointed in myself than hurt by her leaving. I let myself become someone I didn't recognize, someone your mother would have been ashamed of." "Mom would have understood," I said gently. Everyone makes mistakes, some bigger than others. He managed a rueful smile. The irony is that I thought I was building a legacy, something impressive to leave to my children. Instead, I nearly destroyed everything trying to maintain appearances. The legacy isn't lost, Dad. The company's doing well now. Thanks to you. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Rebecca. I should have said that years ago and often. The simple words meant more than he could know. Thank you. As we finished lunch and prepared to return to the facility, Dad's phone rang. His expression changed as he answered it. Yes, this is Harold Collins. What? When? I'll be right there. What's wrong? I asked as he ended the call. It's your grandfather. He's in the hospital. Possible heart attack. My own heart seemed to stop. How bad? They're not sure yet, but we need to go. Now. We drove to the hospital in tense silence, both lost in our own thoughts. Grandpa Collins had been my rock through the years of estrangement from Dad, the one who had believed in me when no one else seemed to. The thought of losing him was unbearable. In the hospital waiting room, we found an unexpected figure, Diane, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, her designer outfit wrinkled, as if she'd been sitting for hours. Harold, she said, rising as we entered. Rebecca, what are you doing here? Dad asked, his voice neither hostile nor welcoming. Your father was my father-in-law for 7 years, she replied stiffly. I came as soon as I heard. Before the conversation could continue, a doctor appeared. Family of William Collins? Yes, we all answered in unison. Mr. Collins has experienced a mild heart attack. We've stabilized him and the prognosis is good, but he'll need to make some lifestyle changes and take medication going forward. The relief was palpable. Can we see him? I asked. Briefly. He needs rest, but a short visit would be fine. 2 at a time, please. Dad looked at me. You go first. He'd want to see you. I nodded gratefully and followed the doctor, leaving Dad and Diane in an awkward silence behind me. Grandpa looked smaller somehow in the hospital bed, monitors beeping quietly beside him. His eyes brightened when he saw me. There she is, the big executive. How are you feeling? I asked, taking his hand. Like an old fool who ignored his doctor's advice about cholesterol for too long, he grumbled. But I'll live. Too stubborn to die just yet. Good. Because I still need you. My voice caught on the words. Nonsense. You've never needed anyone, like your grandmother that way. His eyes twinkled. But I appreciate the sentiment. Now tell me what's happening with Harold and that woman. Diane filed for divorce yesterday, I said. And strangely, she's here in the waiting room. Grandpa snorted, checking to see if she's still in the will, no doubt. Grandpa. Oh, don't look shocked. You know it's true. He squeezed my hand. How's Harold taking it? Better than I expected. I think he's been preparing himself for months. Good. Maybe now he can finally remember who he really is. Grandpa's expression grew serious. Life's too short for pretending, Rebecca. Remember that. After a few more minutes, I left to give Dad his turn. In the waiting room, I found Diane sitting alone, Tyler and Heather having apparently not bothered to come. He's asking for you, I told Dad, then hesitated before adding, both of you. Diane looked startled. Me? That's what he said. They went together. These two people who had once built a life together, now awkward strangers connected by years of shared history and imminent divorce. When they returned 15 minutes later, both looked subdued. Dad had a strange expression. Part amusement, part resignation. Everything okay? I asked. Your grandfather, Dad said with a shake of his head, is the most direct man I've ever known, even from a hospital bed. What did he say? That life's too short for pettiness. That family is what you make it, and that he expects all of us to behave like adults at his 95th birthday party next month, regardless of who's divorced from whom. Despite the stress of the day, I found myself smiling. Sounds like Grandpa. He also informed me, Diane added, her voice uncharacteristically subdued, that I never fooled him for a minute with my social climbing nonsense, as he put it.
And
I prompted, and that despite that, he's always respected my ambition, if not my methods. A faint smile touched her lips. He said I should have started my own business instead of trying to remake Harold's. It was perhaps the most honest conversation I'd ever had with Diane, this moment in a hospital waiting room after months of professional and personal conflict. He's right, I said. You have skills. They were just misapplied. She studied me for a long moment. I never gave you enough credit, Rebecca. I saw you as competition instead of family. It wasn't an apology, not really. But from Diane, it was perhaps as close as I would ever get. The next few weeks brought more changes. Dad moved out of the house he'd shared with Diane and into a comfortable condo closer to the manufacturing facility. Grandpa recovered steadily, stubbornly attending his cardiac rehabilitation sessions and grumbling about dietary restrictions. And I received an unexpected promotion, regional director for all of Pinnacle's custom manufacturing divisions. The position came with a significant salary increase, more responsibility, and a larger office with an even better view of the production floor. You've earned this, Walter Reed told me when he announced the promotion. The Collins integration has been one of the smoothest in Pinnacle's history, despite the unusual family dynamics. Thank you for taking a chance on me, I replied. Not many CEOs would have put someone in charge of acquiring their own father's company. I recognize talent when I see it, Walter said simply. And integrity. You never once let personal history cloud your professional judgment. The promotion meant I would be overseeing not just my father's former company, but 2 other recently acquired facilities as well. It was a challenge I was ready for, eager to prove that Walter's faith in me was justified. The final test of our new family dynamic came at Grandpa's 95th birthday celebration, held in a private room at his favorite restaurant. The guest list was small, just family and a few close friends, but included all the key players in our recent drama. Dad attended alone, still in the early stages of his divorce. Tyler came, subdued and almost respectful, the months of actual work having begun to shape him into something resembling an adult. Heather arrived late, made a show of kissing Grandpa's cheek, then spent most of the evening on her phone in the corner. Most surprising was Diane's appearance. She came bearing an expensive gift and impeccable manners, maintaining a civil distance from Dad while engaging pleasantly with everyone else. When our eyes met across the room, she gave me a small nod of acknowledgement, not friendship, but a recognition of the new equilibrium we had established. As the evening wound down, Grandpa stood to make a toast. To family, he said, raising his glass of sparkling cider, alcohol now being on his forbidden list. Not just the one you're born into, but the one you choose every day through your actions and your integrity. His eyes met mine across the table, a lifetime of wisdom and love in that gaze. I raised my own glass, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. Later, as Dad and I helped Grandpa to his car, he paused and looked at the restaurant where the remnants of our complicated family were dispersing to their separate lives. What a mess we made, Dad said with a sigh. All because I forgot what really mattered. What's that? I asked. Substance over appearance. Truth over pretense. Actual achievement over social perception. He smiled ruefully. All the things your mother valued. All the things I taught you before I forgot them myself. You remembered eventually, I said. That's what counts. 6 months after that, we held a company celebration marking the successful completion of the integration process. The facility had exceeded its production and profit targets for 2 consecutive quarters, and the event was both a recognition of that achievement and a thank you to the employees who had made it possible. As regional director, I hosted the event, presenting awards to top performers and outlining the company's plans for future growth. Among the guests was my father, now officially a consultant specializing in manufacturing innovation, a role that utilized his genuine talents while respecting the new leadership structure. When I introduced him to say a few words about the company's legacy and future, he looked at me with unmistakable pride. "Many of you have known me for years," he began. "You saw me build this company from nothing, and you also saw me nearly lose it all by forgetting what made us successful in the first place." A hush fell over the gathered employees. "But sometimes," he continued, "the greatest gift is a second chance. The opportunity to remember who you really are and what truly matters. Thanks to Pinnacle Industries, and especially to my daughter, your regional director, this company has that second chance. And I couldn't be prouder of what you've all accomplished together." As applause filled the room, I blinked back unexpected tears. The journey from being turned away at Dad's birthday party to this moment had been complicated and often painful. But standing here now, I wouldn't change it. Every step, every hurt, every challenge had shaped me into the woman I had become, strong enough to Leah.